What's up? I want to talk about, in today's video, the transformative state and what it means as far as mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. When you think about being in a state of transformation, you think about things that are changing. You think about being in a state, in a space of change, whether that be simple changes, whether that be complex changes, whatever percentage of change that may be, or let's say level of change that you're going to be implementing, it's still change nonetheless, and you're still interacting with the transformative state. And to not take too long in this intro, change is a constant, and if you're not changing, then you're staying stagnant and you're staying fixated in the things that you have become so rudimentarily stuck in. And when it comes to mentally being in a state of transformation, and when it comes to that, you can't just think the same way that you always think. You can't just have one thought and think that that thought or state of mind is going to usher you into every situation, regardless of the fact that situations change and no situation is necessarily the same. And you'll always have or be pressured to change if you want to be in a new space. If you don't want to be in a new space as far as mentally, then sure, go ahead. Continue on thinking the same way that you do. Continue on using your mind and using it in a way where you're not changing, or you're not growing, or let's say expanding. So tapping into that transformative state as far as mentally, it's like, okay, mentally, I still have to do the same thing. I still have to go through the same situations, whether that be a job, whether that be a situation, whether that be any sort of event that you have to be in. Yeah, you still have to do that, and mentally you're going to be like, man, this is the same thing over and over and over and over again. Copy, paste, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, without any changes. And thank you. Sure, you can go into it with that mental state and mental energy of momentum, but you got to use that stabilityness and the fact that it's a situation that you're used to, it's a situation that you've used your mind in that way before. Okay, so use it as a way to change and to tap into a transformative state as far as mentally. Maybe try challenging yourself as far as mentally. Maybe try to use the mind in a way where you haven't necessarily used it in that way before. Think about things that you can do in order to tap into the transformative state, other than just continuing on being the same that you've always been and not changing whatsoever. So mentally grow, mentally expand, that will be tapping you into a transformative state as far as mentally. And when you do get into that transformative state and you do start transforming as far as mentally, you will perceive things and you will notice things and you will come to understand and you will come to overstand what changes are becoming out of that action and what you have chose to do as far as mentally, and what benefits will you reap, what reward will you take away from changing in that way as far as mentally. You're always going to be able to perceive these changes because mentally you have to be aware, and mentally you have to be persistent in pushing towards change and not wanting to be the same over and over and over again. And that has to do with the way you think, how you think, the things that you do that have an effect on your mind. You have to take all of these into consideration in order to tap into a state of transformation. And it also takes you sticking to that decision and sticking to that space and state of transformation. You know, I could easily say that I still mentally, pretty soon here, gotta be going into my job. And I could also say that's something that I've done for 2.5 years. And that's something that, without nicotine, without a vice, without something that has an effect on my mental state of being. And it could be anything for you. It could be something that you're fixated in as far as a bad, or let's say a negative mental state of view, that you view your existence, or that you view the world, or you view your line of work, or whatever that may be. I could just as easily say, oh, I'm in a transformative state. I haven't used that substance, I haven't used that vice, or I haven't been in that sort of space or energy or state in quite some time. Why don't I go ahead and go back to it and stay fixated and stay stagnant on that, because time has passed and whatnot. But the transformative state is much deeper from that. And a high that you can get from a device or a vice or any sort of drug or substance or negative action that you may get and derive a state of mental sensation from or stimulation, this transformative state can, and doing the shadow work as far as mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, is just as strong of a feeling as any substance can make you. It could stimulate you in any sort of way. And that's something that has definitely helped me in my walk of existence to stay on the transformative state and stay tapped into a transformative state and continue on to do the shadow work that I know that I need to do, regardless of if I want to stay mentally focused on the past, if I want to stay mentally focused on what has occurred before. And I think a lot of times we as beings, we pay attention to the past, and we take things that we have gotten from the past and that have affected us in the past, and we try to apply that into the present state as far as mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's not good for being able to be present and in the moment. And if you're not present in the moment, then how are you going to tap into the transformative state if you're constantly thinking about things that have happened in the past and taking those things and having it have any sort of and sure, it's good to learn things from that and take away what you need to take away from that, but for it to be stifling you and holding you back, then that's how you know that it's a negative thing and you need to let that go. And therefore, if you do let that go, maybe you'll be more mentally open and vulnerable to making that change, and you can start there. See it in a different way. See it in a way of transformation. See it in a way of some way you haven't seen it before as far as mentally. And when it comes to physically, you don't want to be stagnant as far as physically. I mean, think about some who don't choose to change the way that they live as far as physically. They don't change the way that they eat. They don't change the way that they exercise. They don't change the way that they use their physical vessel and the things that they feed their physical vessel, whether that be food, liquid, whether that be any sort of external thing that enters the body. Think about how those people or those beings are so stagnant in the fact of what they're used to and what they've been doing for the past who knows how long. Only that individual knows, and to each their own. But think about the resistance that one might have as far as physically to not be in a transformative state and to not switch over from stagnation to tapping into a transformative state and staying lost in the past as far as physically, lost in what they have been doing as far as physically, and not being able to usher their self in as far as physically to new actions, to new diet, to new form of exercise, to new form of how they interact with the physical world in general. And to be stagnant in that way, it's up to you to make that decision for yourself. Do you want to continue surrounding yourself with the same individuals and being around them as far as physically? Do you want, if they've benefited you, then maybe you will. If they haven't benefited you, do you want to continue doing that? Or would you like to step into a transformative state and tap into that transformative state, regardless of what you're conditioned to, regardless of what you're conditioned from your past experiences and the way that you lived your life in the past? Do you want to continue doing that as far as physically? Move into a space of transformation as far as physically, and what do you get out of that? Out of being in a state of transformation? Well, you're still going to continue having to eat. You're still going to continue to have to exercise. You're still going to continue to have to interact with the world as far as physically. But what are you going to get out of these things? Instead of doing the same things that you've constantly done out of stagnation, you will get better ways of feeding the physical vessel, better ways of treating the physical vessel, better ways of ushering your physical vessel into a state and a place and a space that is transformative from the preconceived or previous negative state that you were in. So when it comes to transformative and being in the transformative state, hop in it in that sort of fashion as far as physically. Change the things that you do. Don't just continue on burdening your physical vessel because it's what you're used to. You don't want to change. You want to continue on eating the wrong things. You want to continue on smoking, drinking, any of those things that are bad for you. You want to continue not being an active person. You don't want to get exercise. Yeah, you may be conditioned, but don't make yourself a victim. You making yourself a victim is not going to get you any closer to that transformative state. It simply won't. You can't reach that if you're so closed off and so stubborn as far as physically. What will you get out of that? No simple thing that you can take in externally and that will stimulate you as far as physically is gonna stimulate you quite like the way being in a transformative state will, and doing the shadow work as far as physically to change and to make those changes internally, and that will reflect on the external as far as physically when you start to make those changes and you start to make that decision that you do want to transform and that you don't want to stay stagnant in your stubborn ways. And emotionally tapping into a state of a transformative space and being in a transformative state as far as emotionally, you have to be emotionally open. There are times when it's right to bring awareness to your emotional state of being and how you feel, and there are times when that isn't the right thing to do. There's times where that's going to leave you second questioning a decision. Maybe your emotional state of being will have you questioning something mentally, something physically, something spiritually. And just because you're so stubborn and it's like all you see is that feeling. All you see is red. All you see is blue. All you see is white. All you see is black. All you see is that feeling, and that vibe from that feeling is the only thing that you can sense, because emotionally, you're paying way too much attention to your emotional state of being. Sometimes it's the right thing to reflect on the way you feel. Sometimes you got to reflect on the way you think, or what do you think is the right decision for you as far as physically. You got to think about, okay, if I make this decision to go based upon how I feel emotionally, is it going to benefit me, or is it going to actually hinder me? And is it actually going to be of great change, or is it going to be of great stagnation? What is that emotional state of being? How is that emotional state of being having an effect on my existence as a being? And reflect on that. And if you're in a state, as far as emotionally, that you can't, or that you know is not the right one to be in, then step into a transformative state. Do the work that you need to do as far as emotionally. Feel the way you need to feel by all means. I'm not telling you to not feel the way that you feel, but I'm telling you right now, if you hop in a state of transformation and you are in a space of the transformative state that we all can tap into, how do you think the world was created if God didn't hop into or didn't use the transformative state to create the world? Then everything would just still be in darkness, and there wouldn't be everything that you see around you when you look out and what you have to experience mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So use that as an example and bring glory in a way where you want that for yourself, and you don't want to just be in darkness as far as emotionally. You want to be in light as far as emotionally. Sometimes you have to use an emotion as a certain motivation. In that case, sure, you can be in a, let's say, dark or whatever you want to look at it as staying fixated and all that concentration of feeling. That's what I mean by concentrated, or let's say the darkness, or whatever that may be. That may be what you have to do in order to get yourself motivated, in order to transformate and make those transformations as far as mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Another time it might be being light as far as emotionally, being more, seeing it as more of a enlightened feeling that will actually help you hop into the transformative state. So you can't just stay stagnant and stay in the darkness the whole life. You gotta let that emotional feeling, and you gotta let your emotional state of being prosper. When it's stuffled out and drowned out by all these things that we have to deal with from the day to day, you don't have your states of being in check. You don't have all power as a being to be able to wield that strength in any situation that you go through. So what do you get out of being in a transformative state emotionally? You get emotions of abundance. You get emotions of originality, emotions of tapping into things that have been entrapped and kind of tied into your mind and your past thoughts and your past memories and all these things that you have tied into the emotional state of being. These things will come back, and it's like, I will tell you, if you're not wanting to change because you feel the way you feel because of the things that you do, and the things that you do you don't want to change, and that's going to change the way that you feel, I'm telling you right now, the things that you do now, once you stop doing the things that you think are why you do what you do now, let's say negative actions or whatever that may be, when you change those, all these traits, all these characteristics that you play out on a day-to-day are going to be amplified, just because they're not drowned out by any of these things that you're putting into your chakras, and therefore it's blinding these abilities that you have to actually shine through. So don't be emotionally stagnant, don't be emotionally weak, don't be emotionally fixated in thinking that you can't change. Feed yourself good emotions, and when you have those good emotions, reward yourself for feeling that. And when you have, let's say, bad emotions, work through those emotions and be able to hop in a state of transformation of, I'm working through this, I'm not gonna feel like this forever. And a lot of times you might have to say, don't think about how you're thinking or feeling about it. Try to tap into your intuition. That's something that I have heard, that I have resonated with, and that someone very wise told me, and I am in agreement with that as well. So I want to share that with you guys today. When we talk about spiritually being in a state of transformation, the way that you look at the world, the spiritual perspective that you have, don't be so fixated, and don't be closed-minded that what you know to be true and what you put your faith, your spiritual power, your spiritual essence into, what you pour into as far as the work that you do as a spirit and the spiritual work that you do, don't think that that's above anyone else. No one's above anyone else. Don't think that the way that you are perceiving and the way that you are doing things as far as spiritually is the end all be all, or that is the holy or the most divine thing or way of seeing the world or spiritual system that is out in existence. Everyone has their own way. And why? because every spirit has had a different travel than the next one over. Everyone has been through different situations, and their spirit has also been in different situations. So not everyone's going to see the world through the lens that you have seen. But as you go through experiences, and as you live physically, emotionally, and mentally in this existence, start to develop and start to hop in a sense of transformation of spiritually. You can still, this doesn't have to be, oh, you need to change the way you think about this is wrong or whatnot. No one deserves to be judged. Not one individual deserves to be judged other than, and you can't be judged other than by the great spirit who we were made in the image of. Okay? And that's not a bad thing. Okay? In order to be able to change as far as spiritually, you have to walk that life. You have to practice what you preach. You can't just say, oh, I'm in a space, and the space that I'm in spiritually is a space of growth and a space of expansion, but you're still thinking the same way as far as mentally, you're still doing the same actions as far as physically, and you're still feeling the same way that you feel as far as emotionally. Therefore, you're not expanding spiritually. You're not developing new spiritual knowledge and wisdoms in the realm of existence that you need to be in order to tap into a transformative state. I'll see you guys soon. Peace.